Radio something when we live. What happened? Okay, so we are live. Good morning, good morning. This is the Straight Talk Morning Show. My name is Andre Hill Sr., and I have my co-host and engineer, Andre Hill Jr., and we have our special guest, our legal correspondent, Kaia Wright. How you doing this morning, Kaia?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
I'm wonderful. As usual on Friday nights, I post the topics of discussion, and I'm going to read through what we posted so that everybody will know that they are tuning into the right show. Hey, did you get a chance to say hello, man?
Say hello to Kai. Yeah. Peace and love. So how you doing this morning?
How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, good.
So as usual, I posted last night, good evening, Facebook friends, tomorrow morning on Facebook and YouTube. This show will be posted to YouTube immediately afterwards at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Straight Talk Morning Show. We welcome our new ufologist community. My fellow ufologists are working on a common agenda of full disclosure by the U.S. government concerning extraterrestrial engagement. One of the key components delaying disclosure is the fact that Black people are having difficulty freeing ourselves from slave mentality. Our special guest, attorney Kaia Wright, will discuss breaking the bonds of white supremacy dependence, validation, and approval. This show is critical to breaking the code of human slavery by low vibrational extraterrestrials. Be sure to tune in. So, disclosure or disclaimer, Kaia is not a professed ufologist. She is a legal mind, and legal mind deals with the implications of, what has happened to Black folks, our slave mentality over hundreds of years. So she's going to expand on that. If you're listening in and you want to call in with your opinion, you can call in at 727-379-2520, and you can post your questions to Kaia or myself or Andre Jr., and if you have a particular question for us. But that's the vibration today. And just to set this thing up, it took me a minute to try to pull this all together, and some of our fellow ufologists, the split of white supremacy and Black folks who are still hung up into a lot of the European religious structures. We still have that slave mentality and not understanding that there are advanced civilizations of pigmented, melanated skin they have been urging us on to come together as a collective for quite some time. So until the Black community and the Caucasian community that wants to separate from white supremacy, until we all come together on one accord, the 1%ers who are being manipulated by by the low vibrational extraterrestrials, they're going to continue to run this program of white supremacy. And so until a large number of Black folks wake up and say, okay, we get it, then the confidence of those Caucasians that want to join, that want to separate from this program of white supremacy will join us. But right now we have to focus on getting our Black people to wake up and reject and rebuke these systems of oppression. All of the political, the economic, and social systems are designed to do one thing: keep us in the hamster wheel, and that's the problem that we as a people have been having a problem breaking. So on that note, I'm going to lead into Attorney Wright and ask her to give her dissertation on how she sees things from a legal mind in terms of what our problem is, and hopefully our Black folks will start to wake up and follow the directives of seek and you shall find, instead of just accepting the policies or the religious instructions that have been given to us, and start to open up our minds so that we can wake up. So Kaia, give us your take on, you know, these are some of the topics that you've been focusing on from a legal mind. Can you give us some understanding on how you see things?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And let me just be very clear on a couple of things. You know, I'm a Black woman, and my focus is on the liberation of my people. You know, as a lawyer, you know, as a person who loves music, as a person who loves to read, it's all the same person. Okay. So my focus on Black liberation and empowering and uplifting our people is not just from the legal perspective. It's not even about that. We could do a legal analysis, cases, but that's not where I'm coming from. I happen to be a lawyer. That's neither here nor there. If I was an accountant, I would also be as dedicated to the liberation of my people. Now, it helps as far as researching skills, analytical skills, critical thinking, that sort of thing, obviously. But I just want to be clear about that. And the invitation to me, which I gladly accepted, was to address specifically this topic of breaking the bonds of white validation, dependence, and approval. And that's my focus. I didn't even know about the ufologist until this morning, so I have zero to do with that. But my focus is on our people and why it is so imperative that we understand this key issue of depending on white people for validation and approval. And the dependence is comprehensive, psychological, emotional, political, it's very broad. And it's important to recognize where that, so here's what we're going to focus on today. Recognizing what is happening, knowing who we are, and knowing who they are, okay? And again, Black people are my focus. I am not interested in white people and them waking up or whatever. This has been hundreds of years of this same terrorism, okay? If they wanted to stop it, they would stop it, okay? There is no incentive, there is no interest in stopping it. So that is not my focus. And I think I may have said this last time, but some 90-something% of our pundits, scholars, etc., are focused on these people as if they don't understand what they're doing. Like they're innocent babies who are children, and just wake up and maintain this system that they built from the ground up and have been maintaining for hundreds of years. We get a lot of performative nonsense from white people, especially white liberals. And we all know MLK and MLK and Malcolm X both spoke about, how damaging they were. We know MLK said, we know the White Citizens Council people and what they think, but the white moderate is even more dangerous. If they wanted to stop it, they would. My focus is on getting my people to understand, again, what's happening, who we are, and who they are. And with that comes the liberation to focus on ourselves and empowering and uplifting. And it's awesome. So let me start off with recognizing what is happening. I'm a retired Army officer, JAG, and you have to know, this is just basically anything really, but you have to know what the other side is doing, right? You have to recognize what's going on. And because a lot of the focus has been to capture our minds as a people, Carter Woodson talked about that, about capturing a person's mind. And then you don't have to tell them, not to go through the front door, to go through the back door. The quote I'm referencing. So it's important to undo that. And one key step to doing so is recognizing what is going on. Our relationship to white people is akin to that of an abuse victim and an abuser. Okay, a woman with an abusive spouse. Okay, there is trauma bonding and Stockholm Syndrome, and we're going to talk about all three of these things: abuse, trauma bonding, and Stockholm Syndrome. Okay, first of all, with the wheel of abuse, there's usually three main parts. There's an act of violence, then there's a honeymoon period, where the guy, he hits her, and then he's sorry, there's a honeymoon, and then there's tension building, and then there's a strike again. Okay, and there are many of examples of this throughout our history with white people. You have slavery, right? Then you have the Civil War and the Reconstruction, this is the honeymoon kind of period. And then you have the tension building, right? Because during Reconstruction, during this time after the Civil War, you have the creation of the Ku Klux Klan, right? So this is the tension building again, right? And moving forward, we have lynchings, Jim Crow. Then we have the Civil Rights Movement, right? In the Civil Rights Act, I spoke in detail actually about various statutes last time, but then you have this kind of another honeymoon kind of period. Okay, we're going to pass these laws that we don't enforce, right? A law is only as good as its enforcement, okay? But we're going to put a band-aid on you guys are getting kind of out of control. We're going to put a pacifier in your mouth, and this always works, right? This tactic always works. So, and then kind of, again, fast forward, you have a bunch of unarmed shootings, various aspects of systemic racism. But then again, you have some weak laws. We're going to do criminal justice reform, a lot of talking, a lot of empty promises that do not result in anything substantive and the dismantling of racism, white supremacy, because there's no incentive for them to dismantle racism. Why dismantle it? They continue to benefit from it. They're not going to dismantle it. Again, 400 years. Why do we keep expecting the same or expecting a different result? We all know about insanity with regards to that. So you have the same pattern of behavior, okay, for centuries. Again, akin to what you see with an abuse victim and their abuser spouse. And there's also a lot of denial and gaslighting that goes on by the abuser, all right? You have them minimizing the abuse. So for our purposes, the equivalent is white people saying things like, basically their mantra is essentially, mistakes were made, it's time to move on, okay? There are many examples of that, right? Taking all the land from the Indians, okay, well, mistakes were made, but it's time to move on. Okay, we enslaved your people, Jim Crow, but it's time to move on. Notice how often we hear white people making comments like this. Now, they don't want to move on from, say, the Holocaust, okay? No one would ever say that to Jewish people, but they say that kind of stuff to us all the time. We all have heard this kind of ridiculous rhetoric, right? So it's the minimizing the abuse. Talking about how slaves some of them, had great masters. I read a great story about these plantation tours and how the narrative is framed, right? There's this need to maintain this delusion that, well, it wasn't so bad, or when you see these slave movies, which is another favorite of white people, they caricature the slave masters, so then they can psychologically distance themselves from those people. Right, well, obviously I'm not like that. Obviously I'm not in the Klan, even though most of the racism then and now is not from, or wasn't from the slave masters or the Ku Klux Klan. Because everyday white folks, like today. So another example of kind of minimizing the abuse. My other favorite, and so I forgot who it was that just made this point. It's one of these televangelist types. But anyway, I think it's one of the Grahams. But anyway, I was talking about, well, lots of people have been slaves. We hear that too. Lots of groups have been enslaved. Every group has been enslaved. Notice that is always said in response to a discussion of our particular experience. we weren't doing any kind of comparison to somebody else's experience. So why are you bringing it up? You're bringing it up to minimize the abuse, right? So another one of the tactics of an abuser, you want to minimize what we suffered so you don't feel so badly about yourself. No one had the chattel slavery that we had, okay? It's not the same. And the fact that they always want to bring it up is a reflection of exactly the kinds of people we're dealing with here, okay? So that's one tactic of the abuser during this kind of tension building phase, the denial and the gaslighting, pointing to outside factors to justify their behavior. Now, one of my favorites here is, well, they were, people of their time. They were men and women of their time. We can't expect to impart 21st century morals and values onto people of those times. First of all, there were people who always knew that this was wrong, not the least of whom were our ancestors themselves. So this notion that, again, and you see this even there, this kind of babying of white people, this infantilizing them, as these clueless wonders. It's insulting, it's ridiculous, okay? So, this notion that there were Quakers, a great book of the Quakers talking about, hey, even in the 18th century, making the obvious point, didn't you just fight for liberation from England? And here you are enslaving people? There were always people who knew that this was wrong. And the abolitionists, many of whom were still racist, okay? They may have thought that slavery was wrong, but they also thought that we were inferior people, most of them, many of them. So you have this kind of pointing to outside factor. Well, that was the time that our people were savages and didn't have souls. And so, they needed a civilizing hand, which I always look for trends. I love to read primary sources, 18th, 19th, early 20th century assessments and analyses by whites and our people. And I'd like to look at what are the consistencies. And you see the same mentality of Black people needing to be controlled, right? Needing some kind, the language is more sophisticated in 2021, but it's the same base comment that you see. Senator Tom Cotton was just talking about how, maybe slavery was like a necessary evil. That's kind of sentiment. Always this need to try and justify their behavior instead of just accepting it. Like, we are who we are. It's lies and gaslighting and obfuscation. The super predator language from Hillary and the predator language from Jim Crow Joe 46, not my president. This ridiculous racist in the White House right now. But using that language, most of us have seen his 1993 crime bill speech on the floor where he talks about us as predators. Again, Black people needing to be controlled, right? Pointing again to outside factors to justify their behavior. Don Lemon saying we need to pull our pants up, as if dressing a certain way is going to stop racism, as if our elders in the 60s weren't marching in suits and still getting beaten. Notice how we've also kind of fallen into this pattern of trying to justify what they're doing. And we'll get into that in the trauma bonding and the Stockholm Syndrome. This notion that we are innately violent or criminal. Another point that is often made to try to justify their behavior. Whenever there's an unarmed shooting, well, if he just obeyed, we have seen countless videos of white people doing whatever they want, fighting with cops, beating cops, guns all in the car, and somehow they manage to work on defusing the situation. And the reason is obvious, right? They see themselves in these white criminals, right? That's their brother, their uncle, their father, their son, their daughter, their mother, right? So there is a patience that is not there for us, okay? And they try to gaslight about that all the time. But again, these are also examples of pointing to outside factors to try to justify their behavior. constantly gaslighting us, right? Well, we can't blame everyone for the actions of a few. This is what they like to tell us when we talk about their terrorism against us as a group of people. But it's interesting how this notion of, well, I'm an individual, so you can't blame me. When people talk about white people have done this, the West has done this, I don't hear these same people accepting themselves out, because what have they done? Okay. But when it's something negative, all of a sudden they're an individual. When it's slavery and Jim Crow, all of a sudden it's, well, it's not me. I'm an individual. But they don't want to be an individual when it's something positive or good that is attributed to white people as a group, often falsely, because a lot of the claims of they've done this and they've done that is really appropriated history from Black people.
So Kaia, now before you go into the Stockholm Syndrome, I want to test your critical thinking skills. Okay, so if you had an audience, well, before I go into the audience, there are three mindsets of Black people. We have a platform, a religious belief where we're still buying into the European religious structures, who thinks of angels and devils, like in the old days when the comedian, I forget his name, he said, the devil made me do this. His name is going to come back to me in a minute. And so you got one segment of Black people that believe in that platform. Then you have a small group who has been ostracized from the Black community anytime they talk about more advanced beings from other parts of the universe. And then you have Blacks that are in between. They don't believe in either one. They just, hey man, this is the only life. It is what it is. Don't hate the player, hate the game. And so we want to address those three mindsets, and also our Caucasians that are listening into this particular. And so you had a magic wand to address the three different mindsets of Black folks and the two different mindsets of Caucasians that we were focusing on. One group believes that white supremacy is good, and I'm gonna keep riding this train until the wheel falls off. And then you got another group of Caucasians that are saying, we know that there are low vibrational ETs that have been operating white supremacy for a very long time on this planet, and they are abusing us. They abduct them, they extract in the abduction process tissue from them. They use them for reproduction and also obscene experiences. And these are the low vibrational human beings that maintain racism on this planet so that they can divide and control our species. So you got two mindsets. You got these good Christian Caucasian people who are racist, and then you got these Caucasian people that are going like, well, this is a pimp game by these entities, and we're tired of it, but I'm not going to jump ship from this white thing until Black folks can at least stand up and say, look, we're going to take the lead on this, and then these Caucasians will join us. Now, I know that's a long laid out piece, but if you had the authority to address these these five different groups right now, how would you address them?
Well, let me just speak generally. I'm not, white people who, think they've been abducted or what, white people, they're white people. So whether they think, they participate in the system of white supremacy, period. What other extra things they have going on in their life is not my concern, quite frankly. And I think we have more than those groups as far as Black people. Religion, etc. Putting aside, the religion that we got when we came here, we've always been a spiritual people, okay, as African people, and had our own deities and gods and mythology and all of that. Okay, so the fact that when we came here, the same way we're wearing these clothes, the same way we're speaking this language, there are millions of manifestations of, our being brought here and assimilated into white people's culture. Our names, our surnames. These are not our surnames, right? Hill, right? So that is one very potent way, because religion is what I mean, is one potent way that I think in a lot of ways, especially back early on, was used to control us, and in some ways still. But I think people have to come to their realizations on their own. How did we get here as a people with regards to religion, as regards to, thinking about what's going on in the universe? It's a huge universe. I mean, it's why we have astrology, and so I think that we as a people don't spend a whole lot of time concerning ourselves about, what might be going on in the universe. I mean, there are people obviously for whom that is a great interest, but as a group of people, religion tends to be where we tend to be focused. And whether people, want to focus on what's going on outside of the world, or not, the in between. So you have the religious, there's something's going on outside of the world, and the in betweens. These are all Black people having to deal with on this planet, okay, in this society, in the United States of America and throughout the world. Racism, white supremacy, systemic racism, white supremacy, as practiced by white people who created the system, obviously, clearly, no question about that. And then those of us who perpetuate the system. So my message would be the same for my people, regardless of their thought about what's going on in the universe, is you need to recognize what is going on with racism, white supremacy, period, so you can break the bonds of validation, dependency, and approval from white people in this country. So the message, again, in that regard, would be the same. We have to recognize what is going on. We have to know who we are, and we have to know who they are. Otherwise, you're stuck in this do loop, and we see it all the time. We see it every day, of Black people seeking this validation, this love, this approval, and not getting on the road to liberation. There will not be liberation of our people without breaking these bonds. It's not going to happen. Their system is dependent on keeping these bonds. And as for white people and what they're doing, they know how to destroy the system of racism, white supremacy. I'm on Twitter a lot, and they'll come in my mentions, and I'm always talking about Black liberation. And they'll be like, well, what can we do to, when you wanted to, for example, make abortion legal or whatever, whatever topic, they know what to do, right? When they didn't want Kavanaugh on the court, they knew what to do. When they wanted gun rights, they knew what to do, right? You know how to get into a system from inside and out, top, down, bottom up, comprehensively. But all of a sudden, when it comes to racism, white supremacy, it's back to being babies. It's back to playing like, we don't know what's going on. I'm not buying it. It's insulting. It's ridiculous, okay? Racism, white supremacy is a centuries-long system that permeates every institution in this country. And the key to breaking the bonds for us, recognizing what's happening, knowing who we are, knowing who they are. And for them, they could dismantle this system if they want to, but it's great. There isn't any incentive to do so. And we all know the performative acts that are done supposedly in the name of doing so, but it would take the kind of sacrifice that we can't even get to reparations. I mean, that's like a simple item. I mean, it's complex, but it's not anything grand. I mean, we figured it out for the Japanese. Not like we haven't done it before, right? In this country. So and we know we can spend trillions of dollars. We see that with the stimulus packages that they keep pumping out. So I'm not moved by these notions of cluelessness and These are just little babies we have to continue to educate. And it sucks up our time, okay? Like Toni Morrison talked about, how racism makes us, focused on trying to disprove, what they say. And then that takes up all of our time instead of focusing on our people, how we can break our bonds and how we can move forward.
Okay, all right. So, is that message in terms of what are you going to say? What are you going to say to our people? I mean, in terms of shaking them, waking them up to this reality.
First of all, let's recognize what's going on. Our relationship is like an abuse victim and an abuser. We are trauma bonded to white people. Okay, what is trauma bonding? Right, it's emotional attachment that develops out of a repeated cycle of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement. All right. And it occurs when the literature talks about a narcissist, but repeats a cycle of abuse with another person who fuels the need for validation and love from the person being abused, right? We see this all the time. And that trauma creates powerful feelings as it goes on the side I looked at here. And you struggle to make sense of it when the abuse alternates with kindness and intimacy. So going back to that cycle of abuse, the hitting, and then the honeymoon, and then the tension building, right? And so you have that connection that people don't know how to break, right? And it's like that line from Brokeback Mountain, like we don't know how to quit white people, okay? We don't know how to quit like the Democrats don't know how to quit 45. So, and you also usually have a power imbalance here with trauma bonding. And a quote with regards to that, in this dynamic, you might feel as if they control you to the point where you no longer know how to resist or break free. That's not knowing how to quit. We've had this unique relationship with white people in this country for a long time. And it has created this very unhealthy bond. And let me go into Stockholm Syndrome. So as we all know, Stockholm Syndrome, the name came from a bank robbery, a botched bank robbery in 1973 in Stockholm, Sweden. And what happened was the hostages bonded with the bank robbers, okay? To the point, and it was only a couple of days, it only took a very short time for this psychological connection to happen. And, and the analysis is that this psychological bond is created because the captors have control over your life, right? It's a life and death situation. And so any kind of act of kindness or not being killed creates this bond, right? This relief at being alive. And you see a lot of that, okay, with us as well. I mean, again, centuries of this violence, and then some kind of appeasement, and then more tension building, and then violence and honeymoon and appeasement and tension. Round and around we go. So, so you have this Stockholm Syndrome, and you see it in so many ways. You see it in so many ways. And I looked at Britannica to get some details on this, and it talks about how the survival instinct is at the heart of Stockholm Syndrome. And the victims live in an enforced dependence and interpret rare and small acts of kindness in the midst of horrible treatment as good treatment. Again, we see this all the time as a people. Little things that white people do, and I'm going to talk about that as well. Civil rights legislation, emancipation, all of which we deserve, but we got excited over it. You know what I'm saying?
So do you consider right now what I've noticed in the media that since Biden was elected, some of the things now you see in the commercials where they're patronizing Black people in the commercials, and also one of the key components, even from the Willie Lynch letter, is to focus in on Black women. So there's really starting to focus on putting Black women in position now, or giving them recognition. Is that a part of those little intricate things that they're doing with white supremacy?
Absolutely, absolutely. What you're seeing is a very fascinating evolution of exploiting and abusing Black people, right? Now we are being used as a cudgel against the right. There isn't substantive concern about Black people and Black women, right? The narrative about Black women that you're hearing now is about how we got them there, right? It's constantly this servant using position, right? You owe us, because we again haven't learned from giving our votes to people who turn around and do absolutely nothing for us. It's the same game, and we keep hoping that he's going to change. You don't understand. He only hits me when he's drunk. You don't see him when you don't know him like I do. It's the same nonsense, right? So the focus on us, notice how when white liberals especially will talk about an issue, it could be any issue, they'll randomly sprinkle in POC or women of color or Black, like it's an afterthought. They sprinkle it on like parsley, okay? And they do it in order to bring legitimacy and bolster whatever they're talking about. It could have nothing to do with us, but they know that in this time, this is something to leverage, right? To silence people and make other white people less likely to challenge whatever it is that they're asking for. So they're using us once again to further their own issues, their own causes. And you see it. They'll sprinkle this on what you're saying with the Black women. It's not because they substantively want to do for Black people. This is how I can use this. Every single major item, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Acts, any of these major items, they were done by white people, not because they were the right things to do. They were done because there was some benefit to them. Abraham Lincoln said about the Civil War, I'm sure a lot of you know this, that if he could have kept us all enslaved and brought the Union together, he would have done that. So all of this, praise for, who's the basketball player who's got a tattoo of Abraham Lincoln on his neck? It's just ridiculous. So, all of this misinformation, and that's another buzzword that's being misused now. A lot of people getting excited about censorship, not thinking about when that's going to get turned on us, especially as Black people, but that's another topic. But I do believe that what we're seeing now with this hyper visibility of Black people and Black women, and what you're seeing in the commercials and stuff, is just, it is fascinating. And Michelle Alexander talked about this in the New Jim Crow, the first place I saw it. But how just remarkably adaptable racism is. It's really fascinating, the system that they built and how it adapts to the time. So yes, in answer to your question, a long answer to your question.
All right. So I know you're going to go into a couple of other points, but I got to throw this in here now.
Absolutely.
All right. So I sent you a file on the legislation that was passed or added into the stimulus bill, and they snuck in there for the intelligence community to disclose any and all intelligence on the extraterrestrials that the United States government have been negotiating with for a very long time. And when I saw that, I know there are only two possible outcomes. And one particular outcome was when the banking cartel went to Congress and there was like $1 trillion missing. And they said, we have no way of accounting for this money. And so Congress just will ask the question, well, what do you mean you can't account for it? Where did the money go? And they said they weren't qualified to answer that question. So in other words, this 180-day mandate for Congress that's looking, because there's so many people now saying, what's up with these sightings? What's up with these abductions? And so they have two options. They can go in and snowball us with the BS like they did, say we have no accountability, or they can actually disclose, the interaction. Now, here's a key issue. If they disclose the fact that the industrial military complex have been profiting from alien technology since the 40s, and white supremacy is being backed to, by this technology that's being shared with corporate America, then white supremacy goes out the window. The division among the races, all that goes out the window, and all humans are going to have to survive by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. What's your take on that?
Man, I think that's a nice desire, but white people have been doing what they have been doing for centuries. Like this is not new. They are not acting outside of their own volition. With regards to Congress and that bit of obviously Congress has oversight, responsibilities. It's well within their rights. It's always amusing the kinds of things they try to sneak into these bills. But they obviously have every right to ask for reports based upon the news that came out that there had been some discussions, and everyone was quite intrigued, I would say, by that news, and so I expect them probably not get a whole bunch of information, right? Congress might decide to subpoena some folks, right? They have the power to do that and make them come before Congress and talk, but it's going to be a lot of double talk. Look at how many hearings there have been on a multitude of issues where it's like, oh, we're going to haul them before Congress. Congress is going to demand, and what you get, these are not unsophisticated people who are new to this game, right? You're going to get a lot of obfuscation, a lot of double talk. I mean, lawyers know how this is done, right? I mean, this is easy. I'm sick of seeing Facebook and Google and Twitter, Jack and all these before Congress with nothing happens. They're wasting our time. They're talking about, yeah, I'm going to get back to you, Senator, or yeah, I'm going to get back to you, Congressman. We never hear anything else. It's going to be the same nonsense. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be the same nonsense. There's going to be a report with, all kinds of things redacted. And then for Congress people with the clearance, they're going to be sworn to secrecy. And so I have no confidence in the ability of Congress to really get to the bottom of many things, not the least of which is something that could be kind of controversial when it comes to, what the discussion may have been, based upon those reports that came out about UFOs. There was also a report that some meteor almost hit us and destroyed the planet. So, whatever. But I don't have any confidence in them to do that. Again, Congress has these abilities. They have a lot of broad powers, and they are going to utilize them. I understand why they put that in there, but they shouldn't be holding their breaths. They're collectively, all of their collective breath about getting anything really substantive.
So one quick question before you go back into your narrative. So there's an old saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So we as the American people who pays the 1% BS us all the time, what do you suggest we do as a collective to stop them from that coming to that conclusion of redacted statements, or I've signed non-disclosure statement? What can we do?
Well, these people understand one thing, right? I think some politicians, at least I think they start off wanting to serve the people, right? As statesmen, I mean, I really like Dennis Kucinich before they redrew his district and got rid of him. But there are very few people that are really statesmen. But one thing they love is power, right? They love keeping their power. They love staying in there. They get sidetracked and they get drunk on the power. They get drunk on people fawning over them. They get drunk over people. They love it, and they will do some performative things that supposedly to help their constituents and talk about how much they care about us. But they act like influencers. They'll put little videos up of them questioning somebody. I mean, they're very immature and unprofessional. It's really embarrassing from what I see. So the point is to go for them where it hurts, which is them getting reelected and being able to continue to stay in power.
Absolutely.
And people should, and that's for many. I mean, I'm as dedicated to women's rights, women's sex-based rights, as I am, Black liberation, or very close to that in any event. But they're both things I'm very passionate about. Is the point. But everyone has a representative. Everyone has senators, and you pressure them to do what you want, and you get enough of you together to where it's going to make a difference. Right. And so I think that's where you move any politician, because it's one thing to try to appeal to their notion of, well, this is the right thing to do, right? This is what you should do because it's the fair thing. But that's not going to move a lot of them. What's going to move them is the thought that they could lose their position, the thought that they could lose this power and this high horse that they get addicted to there in Congress and don't spend time doing what the people need unless it advances their own ambitions, And so people very cynically pitch them on that. It's really unfortunate that that's where we are. It's unfortunate that it costs so much money to win. It's unfortunate that the lobbying and the group, it's unfortunate, but if you want results, then sorry about that. If you want results, then what you're going to have to do is press them in that regard.
So if they're already in office, there's 500,000 people connected to this broadcast right now. And so do you suggest that all of them, whether they're Black, Caucasian, or whatever, send a petition to Congress that do not allow these intelligent communities to BS us in this investigation? We want the truth.
I mean, that's one way. I mean, there are many ways to skin this cat, right? So there are petitions, you can't really go to the Capitol building a lot anymore, but there's, calling and letters and organizing and protesting. Whoever feels really strongly about this particular issue or whatever your issue is, right? The tactic is still the same, right? And we've seen this many times. I mean, there are many issues where people feel strongly about it and bring pressure to bear upon their elected officials to do their bidding. Now, obviously, there are contrasting interests, right? Second Amendment is one of them. I'm a big gun person, right? So there are people who are, on one side of that issue, and there are people who are on the other. So it's like, I'm making my case, you make your case. So whatever the issue is, people need to make their case. In the myriad of ways that we can do this, again, organizing and within to deal with the locally and putting pressure on your local officials and your congressional officials. But with regard to this issue, because it's going to be with the intelligence agencies, then it's going to be the congressional officials that are going to need to feel the pressure to not accept the gains that we know are going to be coming, because it's just the way things are, the way things work. They know what the swamp is, right? They know how those people operate up there. And I would say that again for any issue, if you're serious about it, then you need to catch the ear of people who are going to matter. And it's not just even them. I mean, these agencies. I mean, why not contact them too? Hey, whoever, CIA now, you want to kick up a hornet's nest, but in any event, hey, you're an agency and you're a government agency. We're supposed to be looking out for what's best for us. And we deserve the truth. If that's what they want to focus on, then, and there should always be truth. But again, we know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. And just because you know what's going to happen doesn't mean you can stop it. I say this all the time. I'm a huge sports fan. You know LeBron's going to get the ball. You know Kobe's going to get the ball. You know they're going to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch to run it from the 1 yard line. Oh, excuse me. Wait a minute. Seattle didn't do that. They tried to pass instead. But basically, just because you know where the ball is going to go doesn't mean you can stop it. But at least you know, and you can make that effort. And that's how, we're a Republican. We're a republic, right? Not a democracy. But those representatives are supposed to be working for us, in theory. And challenges to their power is what they listen to, right? Is what moves them.
So what we're doing is changing the narrative here with an experiment here in Tampa. Is we are creating a structure with our community captains to aid and assist these elected officials so they don't have to sell their souls to get elected by going to special interest groups. We're putting information out in all these different communities, and we're sharing this prototype all over the world, really. Because right now, especially in the Black community, the elected officials, what they do is they just run on name recognition and the fact that I got a Black face. And then they end up compromising themselves. And then when groups like us go to them and say, we need money that's going to be effective economically in the community, they'll look at us like we're crazy. No, we can't. You can't go to Massa asking for that kind of money, for a program of substance. So we're experiencing that right now, and we're going to fix it, just like you said in the election box, because we're going out into these communities, we're bringing people the truth. Now, one other thing that's very critical that the advice that we need from you is there are, just like in the Willie Lynch letter, the primary focus was the Black woman. I know as a Black man and my fellow Black men, we have not held up our end of the bargain. But what do you say to Black women who are being targeted with giving them the resources versus the Black men in terms of you're the foundation of our community? What do you say to them in terms of the Stockholm Syndrome, or reversing it, or aiding and abetting their counterparts to bring unity within the Black community?
Well, the Stockholm Syndrome obviously affects all of us. And, Black women deserve an environment that's free from racism, but also that's free from sexism. Okay. And so, it is imperative, I think, that we work together as a people. But this notion that, Black women are being used to kind of drive a wedge, as if, again, Black men are not helpless babies either. And we need to be able to discuss issues in our community amongst ourselves that aren't being properly addressed. Sexism is one, homophobia is another. And I think it's important that we focus on both the unique ways, because a Black man is not a Black woman and a Black woman is not a Black man, okay? We have some common experiences, obviously, with racism. And then, as Kimberly Crenshaw talked about with intersectionality, which has been bastardized and colonized by white people, applying to all kinds of groups for whom it wasn't intended, because this is what they do, colonize. It's like we can't have anything. Okay, so she took this specific great theory, because what had happened is there was a discrimination case that involved a Black woman, and basically the employer was like, well, we have white women and we have Black men here, so there can't be any discrimination. And the point was, well, I'm a Black woman. I'm at the intersection of these two things. You can't say, well, I have white women, so I have women covered, and I have Black men, so I have Black covered, so you should be good. No, I have a unique experience as a Black woman, and my experience is not the same as other women, white, Asian, whatever. And that needs to be recognized because there are unique ways that we are that we deal with, or that racism and sexism comes towards us in this intersection. So I think that, you know, and you saw the exit polls, and they're talking about, well, Black women, and there were, you know, people were upset with who was it that talked with Trump? Was it Dre or Cube? Somebody. And so, you know, there was all this consternation and kind of trying to pit Black women against Black men. The bottom line is we are all in this together as a group, and we should empower and uplift each other. And, you know, this notion about who's getting, I mean, even think about that. You know, it's like buying for attention from your mom and your dad. This, oh, well, you're getting the attention from the white man and not me. You know, it's ridiculous, you know? The bottom line is people are trying to deal with racism, white supremacy. And even though I think we should look internally in building up our own resources to empower ourselves, to minimize the dependency on one hand, on the other, we pay taxes. This is our country. We built this country, okay? And the systems that are in place are supposed to work for us. So there does need to be a fight there, but not ignoring doing for ourselves, empowering ourselves, uplifting ourselves, using our resources to help ourselves. So, you know, I think that we shouldn't get distracted, you know, by this nonsense about, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. You know, Black men came out, you know, we continue to vote for the Democrats despite them not doing anything for us, but and basically using us and giving us you know, pearls and chucks, you know, and you know, we're excited about pearls and chucks. You know, I want to get excited about reparations and reparations. That's what I want to get excited about. Not no pearls and chucks and ridiculous symbology, you know, with her white husband and her white kids. And apparently you can't have two Black parents and ascend to the highest levels of government in the United States of America. You got to be some kind of spicy Black, right? So you're Barack Obama, your father is Kenyan and your mom is white. And if you're Kamala Harris, your mom is Indian and your dad's Jamaican. So, you know, it's not going to be just two regular old, you know, Black folks, Black parents. But I think, so I say that to say we need to get away from the symbology. We need to get away from the performative nonsense. And I know we're wrapping up and I still have some more to get to, but to answer your question, I think we need to not get distracted and focus on how we can work with each other to dismantle racism, white supremacy, and address the unique ways as Black men and Black women that we have unique issues. There are things that Black men deal with that we don't deal with, and there are things that Black women deal with that Black men don't deal with. That's life.
So now I've heard from the legal mind, Kaia, and I've heard from the civil rights activist, Kaia. Give me the military mind of what needs to be done immediately. And I didn't.
Yeah, that's an in-person conversation.
That's classified.
Come on now. You know we got people all on this broadcast and you asking me about this strategy? Come on, man.
I'm just testing.
Come on, man. Were you in the military? Were you in the military?
No. I was
okay.
yeah.
All right. I was going to say, come on now.
Yeah, I know
you want me to, you know, come on now. But I will say this, and I said this in a speech, actually, one of the last rallies I was going to do was the Trayvon Martin rally back in 2013 here in Tampa in front of the courthouse. And I gave a speech there, and I did talk about how important it was for us as a people to understand what self-defense is like, or what self-defense is about. Everyone has a right to self-defense. Obviously it's an affirmative criminal defense, and we understand it, and we all have that right. And here in Florida, we can conceal carry. Like I said, I'm a gun person. I have weapons. I love my weapons. I'm looking at targets right now, actually thinking I have to get back on the range. And I think we should all understand how important that is. And Black gun ownership is going up. And I think it's important for all adults, all Black adults, to be able to protect themselves. We live in a very hostile world, and self-defense laws exist for a reason. And if death or serious bodily harm is threatened, then we have a right to defend ourselves. So I think it's very important for us as a people to understand, though, I would say also from the military perspective, that this is a war. It's not some picnic and we're gonna have another discussion and we're gonna walk in the park. We have been under attack for centuries. Psychological attacks, psyops, right? Psychological operations, physical attack. There's so many ways that we as a people are being harmed, and a lot of us don't seem to be aware of what's going on. We keep thinking, again, well, I just need to talk to him, okay? You don't know him like I know him. I just need to talk to him, and and he'll calm down. Meanwhile, your eyes bloodied, okay? And you need to leave that relationship, and that's the hardest thing to do. People will tell you it's not as easy as it sounds. And sorry, our relationship continues to not be a good one, and we need to understand how to build our own in every way. Absolutely. What if tomorrow white people decided they didn't want to feed us? What if they decided, we're going to cut off food to you. We're going to cut off, if someone wants to come for you, let's say some other country, whatever, we're not going to defend you. What would we do? What do we do? We are so emotionally and psychologically connected and dependent on these people, and they know it. Which is why it's imperative to break the bonds. And I know we're about to wrap up, and I haven't been able to get into it, but
well, we're gonna, we broadcasting every week, so we're gonna give you an opportunity to get to part 2 and part 3. One of the things that in closing, what I want to say to the people, to my ufologists, they're Black and Caucasian, is that for the Black folks, we have a strategy. I will be meeting with Kaia in secret to get the military plans. And, Black folks, you need to wake up and get on board. To my Caucasian ufologists that don't want to participate in white supremacy anymore, I remember a couple of posts where one guy put on a fundraiser that he had ran out of beer, and $200,000 was donated to get him some beer. Well, UPAALL.com is an organization that's working on an economic agenda to get Black folks out of the slave mentality, so we can present the confidence you need to join us with the resources that you got through white supremacy. So donate, go to UPAALL.com and donate to our organization, to my Caucasian ufologists. We have a serious program that's going to force full disclosure. And if you continue to participate in white supremacy and don't want full disclosure, then there's going to be bad consequences all across the board. But if you help support organizations like ours, we can make a difference. We can help with the petition. We can join as a collective, because we know that these low vibrational extraterrestrials are stimulating white supremacy. And we understand that it's not only Caucasian people that are participating. We have Black people, Asian, of all colors that are participating in white supremacy. And they're going to continue doing it as long as this game is benefiting them and not the whole. So that's the narrative of the day. Before we close out, co-host, you have something you're going to say? We're going to give Kaia the last word.
You know, I wanted to, I was kind of like that. I wanted to touch on some more of the military strategy. But what we're going to have to do, Kaia, we're going to have to talk before the show and lay out an outline that is digestible. You see what I mean? So we'll do that in order for, for coming up shows. But no, I want to give Kaia the time. There's a reason I've been sitting over here quiet today. I mean, y'all see me every Saturday. Y'all know what's on my mind. But no, I want to give Kaia as much light as you possibly can to get this message out. So no, go ahead and get into whatever else that is that you wanted to, Kaia.
Yeah. So I know we're about to wrap up, and we'll have part 2 and part 3, and I'll be happy to talk about that, which really is just really about understanding the theory, because that's really kind of the bottom line where it's going to be about from the military perspective. I know we joke, but really it's just about understanding that, understanding it's back to recognizing what's going on, and looking at it from a military perspective helps in that regard. Okay, it helps in that regard to understand what's being done to us, because the solution is economic, the solution is psychological, the solution is political, the solution has to do with our people and ourselves. Doesn't have to do with the military. It has to do with, this system that we have right now. I mean, there's so much we can do in recognizing what's happening. That first step right there. I can't tell you how many people have been liberated by understanding what is going on here, understanding how we're being treated, why this is happening. Then you can shift, we know the art of war, Sun Tzu, right? So, you have to know what's going on. You have to know who you are, and you have to know who they are, right? And then you can come up with a strategy that assists you in doing what needs to be done on the economic level, the political level, etc., in order to break free. I mean, once you understand, it's easy to break free, really. It really is. But too many people, they're stuck in that relationship. So we'll get to like I said, part 2 and 3, knowing who we are and knowing who they are. But understand that these are not helpless people who don't know what's going on. We are an extraordinary people, and the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we recognize that a lot of the things that we deal with are a direct result of racism, white supremacy, the sooner we recognize that we have the resources. We are an extremely talented people. We have the resources necessary to empower and uplift ourselves and break this dependency, because the dependency keeps you locked in. The dependency makes you easy to manipulate, as we see every time there's an election. The dependency makes it easy to keep dangling you along, like a carrot, and having hundreds of years of not getting anything substantive done. A lot of our stats are even worse than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So that is the key. And I look forward to discussing, in detail who we are and who they are, all with the one singular purpose of liberating our people, empowering our people, uplifting our people. That's the only point here. Whatever the strategy that we take, that's what it's about. And doing so, I mean, we live here. This is our country, right? This is the system that exists. And so it's going to take a radical mentality shift because of all of the propaganda that we are fed as a people. To reverse that thinking, have clarity of mind, which then spurs you on to action, all in pursuit of the liberation of our people.
Absolutely. It's mandatory. So that's the last word by Kaia. This has been the Straight Talk Morning Show. I look forward to speaking with to our next broadcast, and Kaia, whenever you're ready to come back on. One of the things in the next show, along with what you're bringing, is I want to focus on, like you said, that a lot of people pretending that they're not aware. What we're bringing on this network is you won't be able to say, I didn't know. We're bringing you the full truth. And so when you get ready to cross over to that next life and they say, well, you knew what was going on, you can't say, I didn't know, because we're telling you. So, also there is a very complicated exempt status for those that didn't know up to this point, and they want to resurrect or bring their soul back from the dark side. We're going to expand on that in the upcoming show. We're still working on that, and so what Kaia bringing and that information. Tune in next week, and we look forward to talking to you, seeing you. And this has been the Straight Talk Morning Show. Peace out.
Take care.
Yeah.